Let me tell you about Alexander Grothendieck, the man who rewrote the entire foundation of mathematics. Every field, every branch, the language itself. Every mathematician alive today works inside the structures that this one person built. And he did it, starting from nothing. As a child, Alexander Grothendieck was locked inside a concentration camp in the south of France. His father had been taken to a separate camp. He would be sent to Auschwitz and never come back. His mother was sick with tuberculosis she caught behind those walls. He had no country, no home, no money, no future, nothing. And somehow, this kid, this stateless, fatherless child with absolutely nothing, grew up to change mathematics more than any single person in the 20th century. But the story does not end there. At the height of his power, when the entire mathematical world revolved around him, he turned down the highest honor in the field. He accused his own students of betrayal. He burned decades of his life's work in his garden. Then he drove to a village in the mountains and disappeared for 23 years. This is his story. Inside that camp, something happened that would set everything in motion. Another prisoner, a girl named Maria, started teaching him mathematics. She told him the definition of a circle. A circle is every point that is equally far from one single point. He later wrote that this was the moment everything changed. That something as mysterious as a perfect circle could be captured in a single sentence. It unlocked something in his mind that would never close again. Think about where he is when this happens. A child in a concentration camp, learning the purest idea in all of mathematics, from another child who is also a prisoner. Grothendieck was born in Berlin in 1928 to two anarchist parents who left him with a foster family when he was 5. He didn't see them for 6 years. When they reunited in France, the war caught up with them before long. In 1940, he and his mother were locked inside a camp called rewrote. 2 years later, his father was handed over to the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz. He was murdered there. Alexander was 14. After the camp shut down, his mother was transferred. Alexander was sent to a tiny village in the mountains called Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a place where local families were hiding thousands of people, mostly children, from the Nazis. They ate boiled chestnuts 3 times a day. When soldiers came, the children ran into the forests, sometimes for days. And somewhere in that village, at a school run by pacifists, mathematics took hold of him completely. By the time the war ended, mathematics was the only thing he had. But what he did with it next, that is where this story becomes impossible. After the war, Grothendieck reunited with his mother and enrolled at the University of Montpellier. It was not a prestigious place, not even close. He worked in the vineyards to pay for food. His mother was bedridden from the tuberculosis she had contracted in the camp. What happens next should not have been possible. His professor told him that a mathematician named Lasserre had already solved all the important problems in a certain area of mathematics, and that they were too difficult to teach. So Grothendieck went home and solved them himself, alone, without guidance, without knowing anyone else was working on it. He independently reconstructed one of the major theorems in the field. A student from a concentration camp, at a university nobody respected, rediscovering a major theorem by himself. He traveled to Paris and ended up in a room with Laurent Schwartz and Jean Dudon, 2 of the most respected mathematicians in France. Schwartz would soon receive the fieldsmedal, the highest honor in all of mathematics. They gave their new student a paper with 14 unsolved problems. Each one was difficult enough to be a full doctoral thesis. They told him to pick one. He solved all 14. Schwartz reportedly told a colleague that it might be time for him to stop being the teacher. At this point, any other mathematician would have built a brilliant career on what he had already done. But Grothendieck was not interested in a brilliant career. At 27, he abandoned the entire field he had just mastered. He had set his sights on something far bigger. He wanted to rebuild the foundations of mathematics itself. In 1958, Grothendieck was invited to join the IHES, France's most elite mathematical research institute. It was essentially built around him. What happened there over the next 12 years is almost impossible to overstate. Most mathematicians, when they face a hard problem, attack it directly. They find the weak point and hit it with everything they have until it cracks open. Grothendieck did something completely different. He described it like this: imagine a nut you need to open. You could smash it with a hammer, or you could place it in water and wait weeks, months, until the shell softens so completely that it opens on its own. That is what he did to mathematics. He did not attack individual problems. He built an entirely new ocean around them. New definitions, new structures, new ways of seeing, so deep and so general that the hard problems simply dissolved. He rewrote algebraic geometry from the ground up. And when Andrew Wiles finally proved Fermat's last theorem in 1994, one of the most famous results in the history of mathematics, it was built on the foundations Grothendieck had laid decades earlier. One of his colleagues later said, "We live inside this enormous structure that he built. We take it for granted now. But the architect is gone." In 1966, he was awarded the fieldsmedal, the highest honor in mathematics. He refused to go. The ceremony was in Moscow. Grothendieck would not set foot in a country whose government he saw as oppressive. Someone else accepted the medal on his behalf. Remember that decision, because the same moral conviction that made him refuse that medal is exactly what would destroy everything he had built. In 1970, Grothendieck discovered that IHES, the institute where he had done all of his greatest work, the place that had been built for him, was partly funded by the French military. He quit. Immediately. Let that land for a second. This was the most important mathematician alive. He was in the middle of a research program that was reshaping entire fields. Students depended on him, and he walked out because the money came from the wrong place. He asked his colleagues to leave with him. Not one of them did. Once again, he was alone, just as he had been as a child in that camp. He spent a couple of years at the Collège de France in Paris, but used most of his lectures to talk about ecology and peace rather than mathematics. Then he returned to Montpellier, the same university where he had started as a vineyard worker nearly 30 years earlier. Something had shifted inside him. He was pulling away from colleagues, from students, from the entire world he had built. He wrote a 1,000-page manuscript called Harvests and Sowings, in which he accused his former students of stealing his ideas and described the mathematical community as a place run by competition and betrayal. Whether he was right, or whether something had broken inside him, mathematicians still argue about that. And then, around 1991, he vanished. But not before he did one last thing. He started burning his mathematical notes in the garden. Decades of work, going up in smoke. Then he called a former student and told him to come get his papers, or they would burn with the rest. The student raced to his house. He rescued 5 boxes, 20,000 pages. Everything else Grothendieck destroyed. Then he drove to a village at the foot of the Pyrenees. He walked into a small stone house, and he closed the door. For the next 23 years, no one could reach him. The village was called Lasserre. No phone, no visitors. When his own children sent letters, he returned them unopened. For 23 years, he wrote, every single day, with a fountain pen, 30,000 pages organized into 41 volumes. He called it Reflections on Life in the Cosmos. Part mathematics, part philosophy, part psychology. 15,000 pages dedicated entirely to meditations on the nature of evil. His children did not know. His former students did not know. For more than 2 decades, the greatest mathematical mind of the 20th century sat alone in a stone house, filling page after page with ideas that no one would read until after he was dead. He got rid of nearly everything he owned over those years, but he kept one thing, a painting of his father, made inside the camp before they sent him to Auschwitz. Grothendieck died on November 13, 2014. He was 86 years old, and he was alone. In 2023, his manuscripts were donated to the National Library of France. One of his handwritten volumes was placed in a glass case, right next to a manuscript by Euclid, the father of geometry, written over 2,000 years ago. Today, mathematicians around the world still work inside the structures he built. His language is their language. His foundations hold up fields he never lived to see. And those 30,000 pages he left behind in that stone house, experts say it will take years to fully understand what he wrote, whether they contain lost genius or the final testament of a mind that could not stop seeing patterns, even in darkness. But here is what we know for certain. A 12-year-old boy, locked inside a concentration camp, learned from another prisoner what a circle is. One definition, one sentence. And from that, he rebuilt all of mathematics. And then he chose to disappear.